I want to talk about some of the principles of which Unwritten is built on. It's not your garden variety role-playing game. I mean, if you've done Dungeons & Dragons or something like that, you'll be familiar with the basic concepts. But Unwritten is something built for the Myst universe, and so is built on a few very important and different principles. This principle is actually built into the Fate system. It's called Fiction First. And the whole point is that a lot of role-playing games are about dice and numbers and things that you add and that sort of thing. And in the Fate system, what's important is the story. And you go to the story first. And this is the examples of this are what are called the gold and silver rules. The golden rule being you decide what you're trying to accomplish and then consult the rules. The rules don't tell you what to do. You know, you don't go to a place and say, I'm climbing into a borrowed cave and it's dark, and they don't tell you what happens there. Rather, we give you tools so that you can come up with something interesting to happen. And that's another part of the Fiction First, is that we focus on what's interesting as opposed to what might be necessarily realistic. It may be realistic that you're preparing for your trip into Minkata, and you have to spend a lot of time, sealing all of your equipment for dust and that sort of thing, but that's boring to talk about. So, in Unwritten, we simply assume that it happened, and we move on to the interesting stuff. And this combines with the silver rule: never let the rules get in the way of what makes sense, narrative sense. So, if you've ever been in a role-playing game and you sit down and go, well, the number says that I missed by this much, and then that means, but I'm right there and I could have touched the guy. No, in Unwritten, you just do it. It makes sense, you do it, you move on. Another important thing is we're in this all together. Unwritten is very collaborative. When you get together and you sit down in the game with Unwritten, it's not just one person displaying their game to players who interact with them. The players have ability to affect the story. Players have the ability to insert things. Wouldn't it be really cool if Gin, burst in right now? Well, put down a token, and it happens. And so it's a game where players have a voice. And ultimately, the whole point of the game, it's not about competition. It's about everybody at the table who are playing the game, they're trying to make each other look awesome. And that's what the whole game is really about. We're working together to make a role-playing game and to make a story where everybody looks cool. So, I want to talk about a little kind of an important side thing here. So I want to talk about the combat system in Unwritten. So combat's a really big important thing in role-playing games, so I want to talk about it. There is no combat system in Fate Core does support that sort of thing. We've removed it. There is no mechanism for hurting people. I mean, you could make it happen, because it's no narrative, anything like that. But there's no numbers for it. You don't roll dice to hurt people. And the mechanics for solving things with violence are minimized or removed entirely. And the game includes how to talk about how to remove that sort of thing from it. And the reason for that is our last principle here. It's that we're going to be awesome, but we're going to be awesome the Myst way. And that means it's about a game about thought and not force. Like I said, you can work your way into something. I need to strong arm this door open, but it's really about coming up with creative solutions. And the adventures are driven by creative solutions. The things that you come up against as a player in Unwritten are puzzles, are problems that you have to solve. They require creative solutions. You can't force yourself through. There's no guns to pull out and go blazing or anything like that. And we focus very much on getting to where you're going through looking at things, exploring things, and trying things out. And so our tagline for that is, the road to awesome is paved with curiosity. And we felt that that's probably one of the best things to describe Myst and the Myst universe. And that's what the things that the game is built around. I wanted to present a couple of nuts and bolts of how the game works. When you're looking at video games and that sort of thing, you talk about Unreal and polygons and that sort of thing. Well, we have some nuts and bolts in role-playing games as well, and I kind of wanted to give you a taste of those for role-playing people, and a couple examples. First is the key thing in Unwritten is something called an aspect. And an aspect is a description of dramatically important details. So, if you say, well, I play this character is a very shy person. And it's fine, it can be a shy person. But if it's going to be a part of the story where the fact that they're shy helps them or hurts them, it becomes an aspect. And it has effects on the game. When you roll dice, you say, well, you're really shy, and that's not going to work very well. Or, you're trying to move through people, and think, well, I don't want to be noticed since I'm shy. That helps me. And these are great because they are not number-based. They're qualitative, and they're statements that are true. They're pivots to the narrative. Essentially, they're a way of you bringing up, say, my character is shy. If you write that down as an aspect, what you're telling everyone at the table is, I want the fact that my character is shy to be important to the story. And because it's an aspect, it becomes important. The things you can do with aspects is you can invoke them, which allow you to do better at things. Say if you were an aspect that says, I am a famous Disney historian, then whenever anything involving Disney history comes up, you do better at it than everyone else. They can also be compelled, which means that they become problems. So if you have an aspect that is, say, you are a hot-headed, survivalist, you may come up with a situation where being hot-headed is not a good idea. So the GM can say, I'm going to compel your aspect, and now you're going to do something that's unwise. And you get points for that. You get rewarded for doing things that make your life more difficult, because the idea is that overcoming challenges is interesting. Here, I want to go through a little bit of an example of how aspects work. You may have heard of this person. The top, there's an aspect called the high concept, which is, the basic thing that says, who is this person? And what's their importance into your game? So, for Yisha, she's the greatest writer to have ever lived. So if she were a character, whenever she's writing, it becomes important. But these are not the only things that define her. We also have a number of aspects called journey aspects, which are other dramatic pivots. She's a few pages short of a full book. Rules of linking don't apply to me. And a lot of problems from Beatrice's bad parents. So, this version of Yisha, this is not the only version of Yisha. Your version of Yisha can be completely different. These are the things that her story revolves around. I want to talk about some of the other things that are brand new to anybody who's familiar with Fate games. These are the things you're not familiar with. We have a special set of rules for investigations, for asking questions. Unwritten is a game about finding things out. And so we have a special set of rules for the ability for the game master to provide clues to players, and for players to ask questions based on the skills of their characters. You may not be a famous archaeologist, but your character may be, and so the rules help you act like a famous archaeologist and give you the chance to ask questions, much like someone who would go to a CSI student would ask questions about, forensics or whatever. Alternatively, we have a mechanic called deductions, which is a different sort of thing. This is when when there's a question out on the floor, well, how did that happen? And the GM can say, okay, let's figure it out. And the players get a chance to make up clues of what's happened. They'll establish facts. Well, look at that. That's a borrow stone over there. Or, hey, there's the inscription over here, and it says, abandon all hope, ye humans, your heroes. These are gathered together. We make a few rolls, and someone must decide, okay, what's the truth of the matter? And whoever makes the roll, who decides the truth, that becomes truth in the game, and we move forward. So a player can use their character skills to completely change the course of the game. This is another important thing, advancement through exploration. Anybody who's played a video game has heard the concept of XP. Hey, if you kill something, you take its stuff, you advance. Unwritten is based on the idea that advancement comes from finding things and finding uses for those things. For example, crystals from here, I got that wrong. That should be Spire. If you find the crystals from Spire, then you can come up with a way that those are important, and then you add them to your character sheet. You can build a lab in Teldelmer. You can cultivate plants in Teledon. And every time that you find a new place, you have the option of cultivating that place and making it part of your story and finding a good use for it. So this is instead of your standard advancement. You don't get XP. You find new things and you do cool things with them. Also, another feature of this is there's minimal number crunching. There's not lots of tables. There's not, you rolled some dice. Everything is measured on this descriptive ladder. So, how hard is that? Well, you have to be pretty good to be at that. Okay, there's my number. I'm really bad at, deciphering the D. Well, okay, you might as well. So there's not a lot of numbers, there's not a lot of adding, there's not a lot of subtracting, there's no fancy mathematics you have to be available with. It's just simple addition and subtraction so that you can get on to the story itself.